Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on what's new in ZENworks 2020 Update 2. My name is Vikram Goyal, and I'm Product Manager for ZENworks Configuration Management. I also have here with me Darren Vandenbos, who is Product Manager for all things security in ZENworks. That means full disk encryption, endpoint security management, and patch management. So let's start forward. I'm sure that most of you do know that what ZENworks does, but just as a recap, so ZENworks helps you manage the lifecycle of all of your endpoints. It also helps to secure these endpoints against common vulnerabilities. And lastly, it helps you protect the company data that lives on these endpoint devices. And it does all of it in an identity-centric manner with the help of a single console that can significantly reduce the amount of time you spend on your ever-expanding endpoint estate. So let's have a quick look into what are the release theme for ZENworks 2020 Update 2. So in ZENworks 2020 Update 2, we started out with 3 release themes. So the first was that we wanted to embrace the modern management so that we can provide the modern management capabilities for the Windows 10 in this release. Secondly, we also wanted to ensure that we can help you reduce the device risk by bringing in a ZENworks integrated anti-malware, antivirus software. And lastly, but not the least, in this release, we have started our phased transition of ZENworks architecture to a modern microservices-based offering, which in a phased manner can be offered either on-prem, hybrid, or in the cloud environments. So these are the set of the products which have been updated as part of ZENworks 2020 Update 2. To start off with, we have updated a lot of the capabilities in the configuration management area. We have a lot of capabilities updates in endpoint security management. And we have a totally new version of ZENworks reporting, which has been released alongside the ZENworks 2020 Update 2. So let's take a quick look at the set of the capability updates in ZENworks 2020 Update 2. As you can see from the squares on the screen, there are many set of the features which we have brought in as part of ZENworks 2020 Update 2. So in the interest of time, we'll try to go through most of them, but not all of them. So you can get a feel of what all things are there as part of Update 2 release. To start out with, let's start with microservices-based architecture and what it does means. So in ZENworks 2020 Update 2, we are bringing in microservice-based architecture, which we internally call as Janus. So Janus is a Greek god which 2 heads, one facing inwards, one facing outwards. And that's how we see this transition as that we want to bring our current set of the customers into the future while we bring in this newer architecture. But first comes the question, why change at all? So there are 3 main reasons why we are doing this thing. One is that we have definitely seen a lot of the performance issues in our large environments, which have some bottlenecks, which really can't be addressed using our present architecture. Obviously, we believe that we can still further improve upon the release times of the ZENworks releases. So we are trying to follow out a cadence of 6 months release, which obviously in this case hasn't really panned out. And that is something which we believe we can definitely improve upon with the onset of a new architecture. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, we want to in a longer term view, we want to provide out a cloud-hosted version of ZENworks, which we can then offer as a service at a reasonable price point. And essentially, at that point, that it can elastically scale up and down depending upon the needs. So as you may be aware, right, ZENworks is a monolithic architecture. It is all of the things running in one box and so on and so forth. So for this transition into the microservices architecture, we are actually taking a phased and stepwise approach. So in this approach, what we are going to do is that we are going to decompose ZENworks into small manageable microservices in an incremental manner rather than doing one-shot thing. And as we actually do this thing, we are going to ensure that we actually have a common code base and a common mode of deployment. So that's something which we want to do, so that all of our customers, whether they are right now on the on-prem or the future customers, whether when they reside on the cloud environment, they can benefit from the features and the synergies of having a common code base. We definitely want to ensure that we have a consistent user experience and the way the things are accessed. And to do all this thing, we are essentially moving to a containerized platform for easier orchestration and obviously adopting DevOps practices from beginning with the focus on the automation aspects. So this is a bird's eye view of the Janus architecture. And as you can see in this architecture, there are a lot of the boxes, and each of these boxes in the final form will look like a separate microservice. So there will be an inventory microservice, maybe a bundles microservice, and so on and so forth. So the areas which you work with, they can be individual microservices, and depending upon the needs, some things can be brought up or down depending upon the load and the performance aspects. But this is not something which we can achieve in this one release. And again, that's to emphasize, this is going to be a phased approach. There are many, obviously, advantages of going this way. One is that we can optimize the hosting as and when we go to the ZENworks as a service. We can ensure faster updates of the server. And most importantly, we also believe that by doing this thing, we can actually, in the longer term, we will have well-defined REST interfaces, which many of you have asked for, which can help you provide better integration with the other tools which ZENworks interacts with. So let's see that what are the changes which are coming in as part of ZENworks 2020 Update 2 due to this shift to the microservices-based architecture. So first and foremost, not everything has been contained microservice way. So most of the things are still one microservice, but what we have done is that newer capabilities which we are bringing in, they are in a form of their own microservice. So a good example is an Antimalware, which Darren is going to shortly talk about, is a separate microservice with its own database and so on and so forth. But rest of the ZENworks still acts as one service. And again, as I said, right, this is a phased approach which we will be doing and breaking down in parts. So what all it does means from you. So what it means is that in ZENworks 2020 Update 2, you're going to have a media-based upgrade and a new appliance. So you can upgrade from either any version of 20.x, which is essentially means ZENworks 2020 or ZENworks 2020 Update 1, directly to Update 2. But to do that, you will essentially require a media-based upgrade, or if you're using an appliance, you will require a new appliance to be brought in. Another thing is that since we are using microservices, we have also adopted Docker on our Linux and based environment. So let's say if you're using a SLES-based host as a primary server, then before you go and install Update 2, we'll require you to install Docker on it, because that's a prereq for having an Update 2 on such boxes. Obviously, on the appliance, which is again a Linux-based environment, we are pre-installed the Docker for the benefits. Some of these capabilities, let's say, as we talked about antivirus, so due to the technical constraints, they are also limited to it will require you to have an appliance or the Linux box in the zone. Another key thing, and which most likely you're going to notice most, is that we have essentially adopted a path change from novel to micro-focus. So as you may be aware, a lot of almost everything for us was essentially /opt/novel. So that is now going to move all those files and the directories which constituted the ZENworks. They are going to move to the micro-focus folder. Do note that this is only applicable for the server components, and the agent components are still going to reside in the /novel directory. So on a primary server which has both the server components and an agent components, you will see both the set of the folders, which is /microfocus, which will now contain the server components, and /novel, which will contain the agent components. We are also providing you a cleanup tool, so you can actually clean up some of this data once we do this migration from /novel to /microfocus folders. Due to this path changes, what it means is that there may be some changes to the log files and the configuration file and so forth. But what we have tried to do is that in almost all of the cases, we have tried to hide this complexity back from you. And we have tried to ensure that the existing commands, which you're so familiar with, continue to work and run in the same fashion without causing any issues. But there can be some of the things which may not really work and for which you may need to use a different set of the commands. So a list of those things is available in our documentation. Another thing which you may notice is that for whoever has applied a FTF, which is a hotfix back on the ZENworks servers, that the earlier process may not really work, because now we are essentially having a Dockers on the Linux devices. So what we have done is that we have actually come up with something called Zocker, which is a lightweight container interpreter. And the beauty of this is that it can actually provide you a consistent experience across both the Linux-based devices, which are running Dockers, and the Windows devices, which are not running Dockers. So for this, we have essentially a set of the commands now which you can run, and through which you can actually take your FTFs and apply them on the servers. Lastly, the one key change we have done is that we have brought in a OAuth 2 protocol support for our sign-on processes and for our authentication across the ZENworks. So that means that our ZCC login is now going to use the OAuth 2 protocol at the back. And this also is going to be leveraged by the agent services as and when they communicate back with the primary servers, and also for communication between the microservices. So this is again hidden from you, but that is something which is worth noting, that these things have changed. Okay, so this was a summary of all the changes we have done as a part of our shift towards the microservice-based architecture. And at this point, I will pass the baton back to Darren, who will walk you through all the good things which are coming in as part of ZESM Antimalware. Darren?
Thank you very much, Vikram. I'm excited to be here today to introduce the anti-malware capabilities that we have added to ZENworks 2020 Update 2. In terms of anti-malware, we're really focusing on two primary areas. The first one is threat protection. What ZENworks Endpoint Security Anti-Malware does is it provides centrally administered policy configured protection against both known malware threats and unknown or zero-day threats. And this includes viruses, worms, Trojans, spyware, adware, and so on, through a combination of on-access and on-demand scanning of files, boot sectors, registry, and memory. On top of that, because no administrator wants to be blind to the threats that are impacting the devices in their organization, we provide threat monitoring through ZENworks Control Center. So this is centralized monitoring of detected malware threats, as well as the current malware status of the endpoints that are being protected by ZENworks Endpoint Security Anti-Malware. We use a combination of detection technologies to help be able to identify and remediate malware threats that enter onto devices. The first is signature-based detection. This is the method of using a signature database to be able to quickly detect known malware threats. We use generic detection, which is really just a form of detection that allows us to be able to detect variants of known malware threats. And then we use heuristic-based detection, and this is the complex algorithms and behavioral analysis that allows us to be able to detect unknown threats or zero-day threats. ZENworks Endpoint Security Anti-Malware is supported on Windows 10 workstations and newer, as well as on Windows Server 2012 and newer servers. Endpoint Security Anti-Malware is included with ZENworks Endpoint Security Management. And since Endpoint Security Management is part of the ZENworks suite and also the Open Workgroup suite, you get the anti-malware capabilities in those products as well. As Vikram mentioned earlier, this is an integrated anti-malware, antivirus solution, but we partner with a top 3 anti-malware software provider for the anti-malware engine, as well as the security content, so the signatures and product updates that come down on a regular basis. If you are interested in knowing who that partner is and a little bit more about that partner, you can email us at zen@microfocus.com for more information. In terms of endpoint scanning or remediation, the anti-malware agent or the scan engine provides all endpoint malware scanning and remediation. As I mentioned before, we can do on access, which is the real-time scanning, which occurs when files are open, moved, copied, or executed. So it doesn't matter if a user is downloading a file from the internet or opening an application. On-access scanning ensures that protection is going on in real time. To supplement that real-time protection, we also provide on-demand scanning. This can be full, quick, custom network scans that you can schedule, as well as user-initiated contextual scans and scans of external devices, such as USB drives when they connect. When a malware threat is detected, that threat can be disinfected, quarantined, deleted, denied access, or ignored. Those are the different remediation options. We also have different remediations for suspect files, so files that don't have a known virus but have been determined to be suspect by the scan engine. All of these things are configured through policies in ZENworks Control Center. We have 4 policies. There's only one that's required, the Anti-Malware Enforcement Policy. That initiates the installation of the agent onto the endpoint device, and it also provides the setting for the on-access, on-demand scanning, as well as the quarantine settings and so forth. One thing I should also mention about the Anti-Malware Enforcement Policy, the wizard defaults to best practice recommended settings for all of the remediation options. You can then customize if you want to do something different, but again, we make it easy so that you have the best practice settings from the very beginning. In ZENworks Control Center, we have a set of security dashlets that lets you know information about the top malware threats, the status of each device. We also have an anti-malware view on each device that drills down into more information about the device status. And then we also have a malware view that gives information about the threat that's been detected and the devices on which it has been detected in their current status. Here under policies, I have an anti-malware enforcement policy already created. I could certainly go new policy and walk through the wizard, but we're just going to go directly into the anti-malware enforcement policy, and I'll show you a few things. Go to the details page. And you can see that on the details page for the anti-malware enforcement policy, we have settings for the on-access scan, that's the real-time protection, and then the full scan, quick scan, external device scan, and contextual scans, which are all considered to be on-demand scans as well. Finally, there are settings for quarantine and the ability to set exclusions that are specific to this policy. So for example, if you don't want to use a separate scan exclusions policy, you can set exclusions directly in this policy as well. In terms of each of the different scan types, you're able to determine the locations that are being scanned, the behaviors. So for example, on-access scans do scan boot sectors, scan for keyloggers and so forth, and then determine the remediation actions as well. This is true of full scans, quick scans, external scans, contextual scans. So a lot of ability to customize the anti-malware enforcement policy for how you want it. Again, as I mentioned earlier, though when it's created with best practices in mind, but with the ability for you to be able to customize the policy. Jumping over to this Windows 10 device where I have applied the anti-malware enforcement policy, I'll show how the on-access or real-time scanning works to protect a device. This test files archive includes infected files As soon as I extract those files, the anti-malware agent detects threats in those files. And by opening the anti-malware agent console, I can see the actions that took place on the threats in those files. Access to this file has been denied. This file has been quarantined. This file has been disinfected. For those that have been quarantined, I can go and look in the quarantine and see that file and take action on that file. Now that we've detected threats on this device, let's go back to ZENworks Control Center and view the security dashlets to see those threats. In the console, the security dashboard includes several anti-malware dashlets. The top 10 malware threats dashlet shows me the threats detected in the last 30 days and the number of devices impacted by each threat. When I expand the dashlet, I can see more threat details and, if necessary, drill down into the individual threats for additional details. The device malware status dashlet shows me the threat status of devices over the last 24 hours. For example, the device which I just scanned is showing as having detected threats that are unresolved. When I expand the dashlet, I can see the status for each device and the unresolved status for the device that I just scanned. Drilling into that device, I can see that the device has an unresolved status because the anti-malware agent had to deny access to one of the infected files rather than disinfect, quarantine, or delete it. This is an unresolved threat because it is still on the endpoint and could potentially harm the endpoint if the anti-malware agent were removed. As an administrator, I can then take appropriate actions to handle this file and this threat and secure the device. That completes the demo. Back to you, Vikram.
Thanks, Sharon, for such a wonderful explanation of the Semantic Malware. So let's shift focus back to the things which are the capabilities which have been surfaced in ZENworks configuration management. So let's start with Windows stand management via MDM. So Windows stand management via MDM. In ZENworks 2020 Update 2, we are bringing in modern management of Windows 10 devices. So this management of Windows 10 devices is via an MDM agent, which is built into all Windows 10 and going on forward Windows 11 devices. So this agent can be used to manage devices in an agentless manner, which means that you don't really require an external agent to be installed on these devices for managing some aspects of the management. So this is a vast set of the capabilities, but we can't really get them to you in a single shot. So what we plan to do is that we plan to surface these capabilities in a phased manner over many releases. So we started out with the introduction of the modern management of Windows 10 devices in ZENworks 2020. And since then, we have been building on the top of it and building in more and more capabilities. And I'm happy to say that with ZENworks 2020 Update 2, it is now possible to manage full lifecycle of Windows 10 devices with a specific focus on a remote worker use case, which maybe is very pertinent in current scenario, where a lot of the organization's employees are not residing within the organization itself, but are working from home. So we believe that the kind of the capabilities which have been exposed, which are coming in, which are there as part of ZENworks 2020 Update 2, it becomes much easier to provision and manage the devices which are available with such remote workers. So let's start with that. What are these capabilities are? So let's start with enrollment of Windows 10 devices via MDM. So with ZENworks 2020 itself, we actually brought in features where it was possible to deploy Windows Pro to enroll devices in via MDM by the deployment of Windows provisioning package. So essentially, this was a Windows provisioning package or something, a small package which can be built in using a Windows Designer tool. And the devices can be enrolled just by executing this particular package. So this package can be embedded as part of the imaging, or if the device is already enrolled with ZENworks agent, you can actually put it in a bundle and just have it executed on the device. You can also push this package through a group policy, or in the worst case, right, you can always put it on a server and have your users download it and execute it. This is something which can be very suitable for scenarios where the bulk enrollment of the devices may be required. And it is also suitable for the scenarios, let's say, where you don't really have an Azure AD-based environment. So to deploy this package and to then subsequently manage the devices via MDM, you don't really require Azure AD. So if you're an eDirectory user or if you're using Active Directory, you can just go ahead and make use of this particular package and enroll your devices into Windows 10. In this release, what we have done is that we are bringing in another way of enrolling the Windows 10 devices, and that is Autopilot enrollment. So what is Windows Autopilot? So Windows Autopilot is a technology which is offered by the Microsoft to set up and pre-configure new devices. So in this scenario, what happens is that a device vendor will upload a list of the devices which have been purchased by you directly into a Microsoft portal. And once these devices appear over there, you can essentially set that, okay, you can assign to these devices a set of a profile which will dictate what will happen to these devices on the first boot. And at a time when these devices are then can be shipped directly from the vendor to your end users in their homes. And what happens is that when the end users receive these devices and start them up, from the boot time itself, the setup process becomes customized. And as a part of the setup process itself, the device will become enrolled into ZENworks without you needing to do anything at all. And once a device is enrolled into ZENworks, then you can obviously deploy many things and you can manage in the way you want. So the key thing is that to do for this particular set of the enrollment, you do require Azure AD. So once you actually have these devices set up and managed via the Windows 10 MDM, it is also now possible that you can also install ZENworks agent on the top of it. So this is essentially a dual management of the Windows 10 devices. And what we have done in this release is that we have brought in a new policy, which is ZENworks Agent Deployment Policy, which can deploy ZENworks Agent on MDM-only devices. And once the agent is installed, then it essentially behaves like a fully managed device, and you can do whatever you want to do. What you can do with a non-MDM device, the same things can be performed on a device, which is now which will act as a Windows 10 MDM plus ZENworks agent. And if you see here in this particular snapshot, there's a slide view here. If you say ZENworks agent version comes as NA, and when it is enrolled via both, you can actually go ahead and see that there's a ZENworks agent which is installed on the device. To bring a method to all of these new features which are there, what we have also done is that we have essentially introduced a new page, which is getting started with modern management. It provides you a set of the steps which you will need to do for the setup, install, and to perform some simple use cases. So this was all about the enrollment and getting started. But in this release, we have also brought in capability where you can deploy applications onto Windows MDM only devices. So that's essentially in the form of the MSIs. So in this release, it is possible to take a MSI and have it installed on a Windows MDM device. And it is in the form of a bundle, and we are just shortly going to see as to how this can be. We also have a newer type of the capability, which is Windows MDM CSP bundle. And what it does is it actually helps you provision features which are yet not surfaced in ZENworks back to this Windows MDM devices. And the way we actually do it is that all the commands and all the configurations which are honored by a Windows 10 device via MDM, they are actually sent to it in a form of a CSP, which is essentially a syntax. It's an XML-based syntax. And what we have done is that we have provided an interface where you can essentially type in this syntax, and once it is done, the ZENworks will take care that it gets enforced on a device. Lastly, what we have also got is that we have provided out a support for the regular device management actions. So this starts out from a refresh, unenroll, retire, unretire, and delete, and so that you can essentially manage the whole life cycle of a device. All across the things, what we have tried to ensure is that you end up managing a device and not an individual agent, because that's what really the thing is all about. So at this point of the time, let's take a look at a short demo of how all of these features we have built in ZENworks 2020 Update 2, how they all come together and how they can benefit you. So here is the GCC. And if you go over here, so you will notice that earlier this tab here, this particular link used to be mobile management, but we have essentially changed it to modern management, because this essentially gives you getting started for all the different ways you can manage a device using the modern management capabilities, which is essentially via MDM. So here, if you will see that you have a newer page for managing Windows 10 devices, and as I mentioned, here you have different use cases which you can walk through. So you can see what you need to do, configure ZENworks servers to communicate with the Windows services. So there are things which you will need to do. Here you can also find out that, okay, how you can set up and enroll non-Azure AD devices, which is essentially through the provisioning package. You can do how you can enroll and manage Azure AD devices using Autopilot, and so on and so forth, and also about how you can do the deployment of the ZENworks agent and the applications. So at this time, let's take a quick look at an application bundle. So there is a new type of the bundle which we have introduced, which is a Windows MDM bundle. And it is with this type of the bundle, you can package out a MSI application for deployment onto Windows 10 devices via MDM. So what we try to ensure is that you essentially have the same set of the paradigm which you have been familiar with, and it should not really involve any kind of a learning curve. So just like any other Windows bundle which you have till now worked with, you can just go ahead and upload an MSI file over here, and we'll fill in the rest of the stuff. So here what I've done is that I have essentially taken a Notepad++ MSI, and I have created a bundle out of it. And more importantly, what I've done is just like any other thing, I have taken this and assigned it to a set of the Windows 10 MDM folder. Another thing to note is that we have brought in a newer set of the registration rules and so you can actually identify and put these devices in their respective set of the folder. So I here have a newer criteria which talks about the Azure AD tenant ID, and excuse me, and all the devices which are having this particular tenant ID will go and sit in this particular Windows 10 MDM folder. In order that you can communicate, the ZENworks can communicate with Azure AD, we have also brought in something called an Azure AD MDM application. And as a part of this application, you will need to configure application in the Azure AD portal and provides this detail back over here in ZENworks, which will essentially ensure that the ZENworks can talk to Azure AD. And this is primarily for the purpose of the Autopilot enrollment. Okay, so at this time, let's take a quick look at how this enrollment workflow and subsequent things can work out. So here is my device, and this is a device which has just assumed that this is a device which I've just received directly from the vendor. And when I open it, this is a screen which I will be greeted with. So what I will do is I'll start out with walking through the steps over here. So once I will choose the lane, and then I will choose the keyboard. I'll skip the second keyboard layout. And at this point at the time, all the Windows 10 devices, what they will do is that they will contact back with Microsoft and find out that, okay, is there something which is set up for me? Now for this device, what has happened is that this was a device which has just came in from the vendor. And there is a portal which is available on the Microsoft site in which you can specify the characteristics of the things which will happen with this device. So let's take a quick look at this particular portal. So this is the business store for the Microsoft. And if you see over here, I have my device, which is available over here. And here you have a capability where you can specify that what kind of the screens will be available as part of this particular device. So here I can go and edit a profile, and I can say that, okay, which screens I want and which screens I don't want. So I can choose to skip the privacy scheme. And more importantly, it is possible to even disable the local admin account creation on the devices. So at this time, let's switch back to the device. On this device, the end user can just sign in with their Azure credentials. So that's what I'm going to do. So once I sign in with the Azure AD credentials, what will happen is that the Azure will recognize that this device is enrolled with your organization, and then it will essentially pass on the address of your ZENworks server back to this device. And as and when the device reaches these ZENworks servers, it will be presented with this terms of the use policy. So this is a new screen which has been again coming in as part of ZENworks 2020 Update 2. And within ZENworks Control Center, there's a new policy which we have introduced, which will control that what is the text which you see on this particular screen. So if I go to the policies over here, I can see there's a terms of the use policy. And as a part of the terms of use policy, I can go and specify my terms of use and the text which you're going to see here. Since your end users may not be using one language across different things, you will have an option to provide more set of the language. In this case, what I've provided out here is a Russian. So going back to the device, if you see here, I do have an option where I can switch to Russian if I want, or I can continue with English. I'll go ahead and accept it. And at this point of the time, the device will get enrolled into ZENworks, and it will skip the rest of the panes which may come in. So at this time, the device should be enrolled back with ZENworks, and this is something which we can verify on the device itself by going to Access Work and the School setting. So over here, it tells me that it is connected to the Azure AD, and if I go and click on the info section, it will tell me that it is managed by ZENworks, and it would also tell me there's an application which is already installed. So I can just verify. And as I can see that the Notepad++, which I had assigned and created, is already installed on the device. At this point of the time, it is actually possible to even, as I mentioned, to have this device dual managed by the virtue of installing ZENworks agent on it. And for this very purpose, we actually have another policy which can be deployed onto such devices. So going back into the ZCC, if you will see, we have a new policy, which is an agent deployment policy. And as a part of this policy, you can specify that which is the ZENworks agent, what type of the ZENworks agent you want to deploy onto devices. And in this case, what I have done is that I have assigned this policy to this particular folder, which means that any device which is going to get registered via the Windows 10 MDM will automatically get ZENworks agent installed on it as part of the enrollment itself. So over here, you can see that the device is come in, and right now it is managed only by the ZENworks Windows 10 MDM agent, and there's no agent installed. But since we had assigned that agent to be installed on the deployment, the agent installation will happen shortly after the device is set up. So let's wait for a while. Shortly thereafter, you can see that the ZENworks agent has been installed on this device. In the ZCC, we can see that now this device is being managed both by the ZENworks agent, also by the MDM agent. At this point of the time, what we can do is that we can actually install further set of the applications on this device. So let's see this Windows 10 MDM CSP bundle. So this is another newer type of the bundle, and which, as I mentioned, can be used to deploy Windows CSP configuration service provider commands back onto the devices. And this can primarily be the capabilities which are not yet surfaced in ZENworks right now. So as a part of the CSP, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to hide the restart button on the device. And again, this is just like any other bundle, and I'm going to assign it to a device. I also have a Google Chrome application, which is another MDM-based MSI application. and a normal web application, which is which will be installed by the ZENworks agent. And if you see over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all three of them and I'll just straight away assign to the device. And ZENworks will take care of it, that which applications get enforced by which set of the agent. So here they are assigned. At this time, since I've just done the assignment, what I can do is I can go and refresh the device so that these assignments can reach the device and these things can be executed on the device. So I'll go ahead and do a refresh workstation quick task. So again, when I do this quick task, what ZENworks will do, it will refresh both the ZENworks agent and the MDM agent back on the device. So from your perspective, you're just refreshing the device and you're really shielded from day-to-day task of managing the individual agents. So we'll go ahead and start the quick task. So let's go and check the device. So if I go in device, I already see that the Google Chrome application has been installed on it. And at this point of the time, if I go see, the restart button has been hidden on the device. Lastly, if at this time, if I want, I can just go and delete the device from my zone. So let's take a quick look at how you can record a remote management session with the set of the capabilities which we have introduced in ZENworks 2020 Update 2. So recording for remote control session, this has been a much requested idea, and as you can see, this has been there for quite some time. So we are pleased to see that we are able to get this feature back to you in this particular release. So this is, as of now, this is an experimental support for recording, and we plan to make it official in the upcoming release. So what we have done is that we have provided you a new policy setting through which you can control that whether a remote control session can be recorded or not. So if I go and look at my policies, you will see there's a remote management policy. And as a part of the details, we have a tab which says allow recording the remote management session. So by default, this is unchecked and you can't really record. So this will help you enforce control as to that which also type of the devices the session can be recorded or not, or which admins can do so or not. So that kind of the controls is possible. So let's see how you can go ahead and record a remote control session. So let's go and launch a remote control session itself. So here we have this device which we are going to remote control. So we go ahead and launch remote control session for this. It says waiting for the user to accept the request. So let's go ahead and accept that request over here. Once we have accepted request, you can see our remote control viewer. And if you will notice, we actually have a button over here, which is a record. So if I click on this thing, it will tell me that the recording is in progress. And if I go and see how the user will also see the same screen, and they can see that the recording is progress. So they are aware that the session is being recorded. If you're actually wondering that what is this new icon over here? So this icon corresponds to ZENworks chat capability, but this is right now disabled in this particular release, but we are working on how we can actually get this setting enabled and across to you. So this is again one of the ideas which we wanted to bring you in to you in this release, but we have run into some issues and we are trying to resolve this, and it's for that particular reason that this is disabled, at least as of now. Going back to the presentation. So if you see, the recordings are right now logged onto this particular folder on the technician's workstation. But going forward, we want to get these recordings available as part of the ZCC and in a proper audited format. Currently, also another limitation right now that these recordings can only be viewed with the RFP player, which is available from Type PNC. Again, going forward, we are working that how we can get these recordings converted directly into the MP4 so they can be played by any kind of the viewer. And it is essentially due to these set of the limitations that this particular feature is still in an experimental mode. But as I mentioned, we are working on it to get it to a full production support in a forthcoming release. So let's go back and let's talk about this feature, which is enhanced security for the DMC servers. So what has changed is that in this release, we are actually bringing in a newer way how you can securely register your devices over the internet. We've also made sure the content download that happens over SSL, and that is for both primary and the satellite servers. So for the primary server is something which we had introduced as a part of the update one itself, but we have now extended that capability on to satellite servers also. And along with it, the collection is already available over SSL on both primary and the satellite servers. But for both of them, we have essentially added some more authentication checks to avoid the misuse. So how it can help you is that if you have a device which is over the internet, so by making use of the secure registration process, what you can do is that you can actually ensure that these are only the bona fide devices can register to your zone, and there's no rogue device which can register. And by ensuring that the content and the collection can go over SSL, so it is now possible that it is now ensured that all the communication between the agent and the server is over SSL, and potentially the port 80 can be closed altogether. So all these things are specifically useful for a DMC kind of the environment. And if you see, this is your typical DMC environment infrastructure where managed devices are communicating to the server or to this particular server, which is situated in the DMC. So what you can do is that you can actually apply a set of the settings onto this particular server, which will harden the security posture and will ensure that such server communicates securely over any such devices which are outside and communicating with it. So for this, what we have done is that we've introduced a new setting which can help you toggle the secure communication between the agent and the server. So this setting is in the form of a zman command, and it is available on a primary server. If you have satellites which are also out there, which are not in your intranet, but is out there on the internet or on the DMCs, you can also toggle this setting on those satellite servers by making some config changes. A key thing to note is that by default on an upgraded zone, this particular setting is turned off. So the reason why we have done that is that if you turn these settings on, you have to ensure that your devices are enabled to make use of these new security features. So if you have, let's say, non-update 2 devices in your zone, those devices won't be able to then communicate with your primary servers. So that is the reason that we have gone ahead and on an upgrade, we have turned this setting by default off. But if you're bringing up a newer zone, this setting will be turned on by default. Obviously, we strongly recommend that you turn it on for all servers and not just the DMC servers, because it actually ensures a lot of the security enhancements which are very beneficial for the your zone. We will strongly recommend that you follow the documentation to turn it on in a proper manner so that you don't to avoid the disruptions in the operations. Once you have actually turned this particular setting on, then what it will mean is that the registration of the devices over internet will require some kind of the pre-verification. So this pre-verification is in a form, so for this pre-verification, we have essentially provided 2 different ways. One is in the form of an authorization key, and another is in the form of a pre-approval device. So let's just see what this authorization key is and where it can be found. So if you go back to configuration and to the registration, you will see another snapshot for authorization keys. And here you can actually go ahead and create a new authorization key. So you can choose to generate a key, or you can create your own. And you can say that, okay, how many times this key can be used. And more importantly, there's also, you can attach out an expiry onto it. So you can say that it will all on which particular date, and so it will expire. So this key, once you have it, then it will be required for registering your device with the zone. And so this key can be embedded as a part of the image, or it can be the ZENworks agent can also be launched as a form of this key using command line parameters. Or if you're actually, if your end user is manually installing the ZENworks agent, it is possible that there would be a prompt in which this key can be entered. If you don't want to make use of the authorization key, then you can also choose to make use of a pre-approval of the devices. So pre-approved devices are a set of the devices which you have already approved. So these are essentially your devices, and which you know the identity of these devices, and then you have distributed them to your end users for the usage. And so essentially you can actually make a note of these devices in the ZENworks, and then ZENworks will recognize that, okay, hey, this, as and when this device tries to register, okay, this is a bona fide device. It will essentially trust the device, and it will allow the registration of such devices. There are many ways in which you can actually add these devices. You can go ahead and add these devices in a manual manner, or you can actually import these devices through a CSV format altogether. So let's shift the focus and have a look at some of the capabilities which we have brought in on the mobile management, specifically for the Android devices. It is now possible to assign Play Store apps to devices along with the users. So this was a customer idea, and I'm happy to say that it is now possible to do this in this release. So what are the benefits? So this actually brings the deployment capability on par with the iOS and the iPadOS devices. With the support of the app assignment to the device groups, now it makes it possible that you can target the devices matching a specific criteria rather than trying to match out the users at all. And obviously with the sandbox support coming in, it makes it easier to test apps on a specific set of the devices. So if you see over here, you have another tab which is coming in, direct assignment. So it was previously disabled, and now you can go ahead and take an app and assign it to a device altogether. So this is a small, but I believe a very useful enhancement for our customers who are using ZENworks to manage their Android devices. Going back, we have another feature, which is the provisioning of the system apps on the Android devices. As a part of this feature, what we have done is that we have brought in a new capability where you can provision or the unprovisioned system apps on the Android devices. So this is specific to the apps which have actually a launch icon. So what it actually allows you to do is that typically till now, when you were setting up Android devices, you had really no control over that which are the default apps which actually appear on the within the work profile on an Android device. So this particular capability helps you customize the kind of the apps which are available on as a part of the work profile. So you can choose to hide some set of the default apps which may not be required, say camera or phone, if you actually have some certain set of the use cases, or you can also choose to provision the system apps which are not provisioned by default. So we have seen cases that there are apps which are specific to the device manufacturer and may not be available as a part of the Google Play Store. So if they are not part of the Google Play Store, then it is not right now possible to assign them to the device. So, but they reside on the device altogether. So with this capability, it is possible now to take such apps and get them onto the device. So let's take a quick look as to how this can work out. So here we have a new bundle which goes by the name of the system app category. Within this bundle, if you go to the details section, it is possible that you can actually choose and you can specify that which set of the apps which will be available. So when I click on the app, it will help me if I'm aware of a particular app name, I can specify that app name, or I can actually even choose to search the apps from the ZENworks inventory, in which case it will show me all the app information which is available. So if I search for the device manufacturer, it will show me all the apps which are matching the device manufacturer, and it pulls in this data from the ZENworks inventory. And depending upon what I'm really looking for, I can actually select that particular app and make it available here. Once I go ahead and assign this bundle to the devices, only these specific set of the apps will then be available by default onto the device. So from that perspective, you should ensure that the apps, if you're planning to use the system app bundle, that you come up with a good set of the list of the apps which are required to be available by default. So those apps can be included as a part of this specific bundle. Key thing to note is that system app bundle only enables the provisioned app, and rest of the system apps get hidden on the device. And unassigning system app bundle would not unhide the hidden system apps. So that would essentially require re-enrollment. We have also got a new tool, which is in the form of service to appliance migration tool. So this is again a customer idea which was quite requested. So as a part of this, now you can migrate your ZENworks 2020 update to Windows or Linux-based servers. So these servers can be in the form of the virtual or the physical. And now you can actually migrate them to ZENworks 2020 update to Appliance. So this is something which is particularly useful because we have capabilities which are right now available only when an appliance is there in the zone. So something like Antimalware. And so if you want to shift to such kind of environment, it is now officially possible to move your physical or virtual servers to an appliance form. Obviously, having an appliance helps you significant reduction on your OS licensing cost. Going back, let's look at some of the other improvements which are there as a part of this release. So we have many customer ideas and the enhancements, so you can, and so on and so forth. So key thing is that now you can actually manage a CentOS device as a managed device in the zone. So that is something which is now supported by the ZCM. We have some puppet policy changes. We have some new tools, and obviously some newer set of the supported platforms as part of update 2. So let's take a quick look at some of the other things which we have in store. So first thing is the remote management of an RDP sessions. So in this feature, what is now possible is that it enables an admin to connect the RM viewer to an RDP session which is going on, which is something which was not possible till now. So it allows the viewer, which is essentially the RM viewer, to remain connected even if the RDP session gets connected, and admin will get notified that this session change, and so on and so forth. So right now it can only work when only single RDP session is going on, but we are actively working that how we can extend the session support when the multiple sessions are going on a device. We have also significantly improved our workflow for the copy relationship feature. So this is something which was specifically used by a lot of our customers when they want to copy the relationships from one device to another. So here we have introduced facility where you can continue on the failure, which will essentially allow you to complete the process without worrying about one failure stopping the whole process. We have made improvements as to how the results are shown and how the status messages are shown. So it is much more clearer. And we have also provided a way where these success and the failures can now then be exported to CSV. So you can go back, analyze as to that why something failed and take an appropriate action and come back and redo the exercise if needed. And lastly, there are some significant performance changes. So some of the operations which would have taken 30 minutes earlier can now be completed in 2 minutes or so. Last major change is that we have improved upon our remote management viewer. So as a part of it, we have improved upon the file transfer performance, and we have also ensured that our new viewer has all the capabilities which were present in our older viewer. And that's why if you would have noticed that in older viewer is now a legacy viewer and the new viewer is by default. Lastly, let's take a look at the ZENworks Reporting 7.8. So we have a new ZENworks Reporting 7.8 engine, which we have released. So key thing to note is that this is not in a form of a new appliance, but it is being available as part of an online update. And this update is already available. So if you go back onto your appliance and search for updates, you would see this new engine update available as a patch there. In this, we have made some changes on to that how that you can specify the user groups which can log into the ZIA. So you have now a choice of the user groups which you can manage. And apart from this, the engine also comes with its own set of the security fixes. There are lot of performance improvements, and then there are a lot of the visualizations which are available. And that is all from my end. And let me pass the baton back to Darren for further elaboration on other capabilities which are available as a part of ZENworks 2020 Update 2.
Thanks, Vikram. I'm going to wrap up today's presentation by briefly mentioning an enhancement we've made to the Microsoft data encryption policy. For those of you who might not be aware, the Microsoft data encryption policy is a security policy in ZENworks Endpoint Security Management. It provides encryption of removable data drives using native BitLocker technology. In this release, we've added the ability to exclude removable data drives from encryption. In the previous release, when you turn the policy on, all drives were encrypted. Now you can remove that blanket encryption requirement and target specific removable drives to not be encrypted if that's a need within your organization. We'd like to thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.